Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, hi, hi.
How are
Good
you
to see
today?
you. I'm doing fine. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that we could do this.
My pleasure.
So, I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you, and I know I had shared them with you yesterday just to kind of give you a heads up. So, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Dan Shapiro, and I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician working in Rockville, Maryland. The first part of my career, I did primary care pediatrics with some developmental behavioral pediatrics embedded in that setting. And then I made a shift to focus exclusively on development and behavior quite a few years ago now. So my day job is consulting with parents, seeing children, pandemic or not, we, we do the best we can.
Sure.
I'm the person who might get called if a child has developmental differences early in life, behavioral challenges, figuring out where those differences and challenges come from, and putting together usually a team approach to helping kids. So that's the day job. The night job is a parent group training in behavior management, parent group discussion on a variety of topics in developmental behavioral pediatrics. So this is the Parent-Child Journey program. You can go to parentchildjourney.com and find out about the 10-session integrated training program for parents of challenging children, and then the special topics programs that we call the excursions. So that stuff's going on behind the scenes as well.
I imagine that your time is pretty in demand right now.
It's busy. It's always busy because there aren't enough developmental behavioral pediatricians for all the kids out there who need this kind of help. But with the pandemic, I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. I think the stress of the pandemic does amplify some issues that were there before and create some new ones that we never thought we'd have to deal with, back in the day, pre-COVID. So it has been busy, it has been challenging, and especially trying to do assessment and deliver services online. All of us have had to reinvent ourselves in lots of ways.
Absolutely. I know families are dealing with just a lot of heavy topics right now, whether it's pandemic related or educational challenges, racism, social injustices,
Yep.
politics, financial burdens, and I'm sure plenty more things. And it feels like each of these things individually can really evoke a lot of emotions, not just for the children, but for the parents as well. And I know that there are just so many parents that are trying so hard to navigate working from home and identifying alternative childcare. And then on top of all of that, educating their own children from home,
Yep.
maybe providing virtual support or, taking on homeschooling and working to accomplish all those other, usual tasks that would happen at home. And I think as a result, schedules are varying and the old routines might not work anymore. And responsibilities and expectations might be shifting. And so I do believe that, some children, are met with developmental challenges on top of all of that. And so I'm kind of wondering, with all of that in mind, um, what um, what kinds of tips and tricks are you sharing with parents regarding managing some of those, challenging behaviors that come up as a result of all that change?
Yeah, well, Stacey, you summed up the
A big one.
complexity of things really quite well. And we try to approach things in a realistic way. Sometimes it does mean temporarily changing expectations. It's not business as usual in terms of school performance. It's not business as usual in terms of social connection. It's not business as usual in terms of family dynamics. What people are dealing with in their homes is very, very complicated. So we want to set realistic goals for these circumstances. And that's a reality check that I'm helping parents with all day long. Hey, what adjustments need to be made here? And then we create a to-do list. What strengths and interests can we reinforce? Doesn't all have to be problem oriented. We can look at strengths and maybe create some opportunities that the pandemic, is our friend in terms of not the same time in school. Some kids are doing things that they never would have had a chance to do before, but there certainly is a to-do list that has problem situations, problem behaviors, and my approach is to pick those off one at a time. Don't try to build Rome in a day. Set priorities. Which are the challenges that most need our help? Let's think about proactive strategies. What can we do uh, preemptively to help minimize the difficulties? And what should we do reactively when things continue to go imperfectly? So there has to be a lot of forethought if we're going to do development and behavior well under these circumstances.
Absolutely. I know that when I work with families, usually it's because they've already seen a specialist and, they're interested in figuring out how to implement some of these like actual plans in their homes, how to make coming into the house, easier, or how to make the dinner time routine easier, or, how to improve the bedtime routine. How do we tweak this one part so the child will
Mhm.
cooperate? And so taking the suggestions that the specialists have provided and implementing those in an effort to reduce some of this stress that you're addressing is really important. And I think you're right. When it comes to parents right now and children, they are experiencing life in a different way. They're kind of like living a modified version of their former lives. And
Mhm.
so, one of the things that I've actually done in my own home that has been incredibly helpful is identifying everything that's the same, because
Mhm.
sometimes like all those things that are different kind of like mount up and feel stressful or feel overwhelming. And so giving my children and myself an opportunity to just recognize all the things that are actually the same feels really good. And so that way when we meet something that is different, or we experience a situation where we have to be flexible, it doesn't feel like such a big blow, because we've already recognized all the things that are the same. And oh well, this is just one thing that's a little different, or explaining to the child why we have to do something different, in within the context is also really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Stacey. And all the research literature and common sense tells us when we're talking about resilience, how to make it through tough times. One of many things that's helpful is ritual, routine, familiarity, holding on to whatever semblance of stability we can. And so, whatever old routines you can keep in place, that's always good. If there are family traditions to keep alive, you might have to modify them in certain ways. Keep them going, and it grounds not just children, but parents too. So I think it's a wonderful idea, Stacey, to look, hey, what is the same? Let's let's hold on to that best we can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes a huge difference. And then I know, with my own children, they're 2 and 5, and we live in a space where we are required to wear masks to be able to leave our unit and go through common areas.
Mhm.
And the phrase we use is, all right, it's time to tuck our noses away. And so it just kind of lets the child know, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, we've got like a little pouch for each child of their masks, and they choose the one that they want. So the choice is theirs. And it kind of empowers them because they feel like, this peculiar thing isn't happening to them, it's happening with them. And that makes them feel a little better about this, one behavior that's, different than perhaps what we're used to.
Yep.
So,
And a little humor, a little levity, we'll tuck our noses in,
yep.
so some fashion statements about what kind of masks to have. I think keeping it light is always a good idea. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I am wondering if we could pivot for a moment and talk a bit more about managing some of this challenging behavior, because I know that when it comes to things being different in our daily lives, whether it's routines that we have or expectations and schedules are changing, that is when some of this challenging behavior has a way of kind of sneaking up. And so I'm wondering, what do you do to encourage parents to kind of get to the root of that behavior?
Well, that's the key, right? Because if you just try to, fix tantrums or just try to fix difficulty getting online for school, if you just try to fix sleep problems or getting going in the morning problems or, all the common things without really evaluating where those problem behaviors are coming from, you're going to fall into some one size fits all kind of behavior management, which never works. You're going to get frustrated because what you try is not going to be so effective. So we need to understand the source of problem behaviors. And we do that by asking, well, what is it about the child? What is it about the child's temperament? What is it about the child's strengths and weaknesses? Their sensory profile? What is it about the child's current environment, not just the pandemic, but other factors, other variables? And once we understand where the problem behavior is coming from, then we can customize an approach and do individualized solutions too, not just individualized understanding where the problem comes from, but an individualized set of strategies. Now, I'm speaking in generalizations,
Sure.
and it'd be good to talk about maybe some specific examples about how to apply this kind of thinking. But that's what proactive behavior management looks like: assessment and then individualized care. So I always have allergic reactions when one solution is suggested for all kids, as if all kids are built the same. Um, so, devil's in the details.
Absolutely. So I don't know, a good example might be, the child who is, let's say, 3 years old and comes to sit at the dinner table and immediately shouts, "I don't want this!" Takes the plate, launches it into the air, food flies everywhere.
Yep,
And now you're in a situation where the food you prepared is now on the floor.
yep,
The child is all riled up, and you're trying to figure out what gives, right?
yep,
And
yep.
so, in
Perfect
a
example. Yep,
situation like that,
yep.
what kinds of things do you typically recommend?
Yeah, perfect example. So we'd want to first talk about reactive strategies. How are we going to deal with that once it's happened? And there are three general paths that you can go down. And this is modified from Ross Greene's a great work. His book, The Explosive Child, deserves to be a classic. And we talk about three buckets or three plans. You can either get into a timeout mentality where, okay, you just threw the food all over, you're in timeout, or and you pick up the child and put them away and close the door. Most of us would say it's not appropriate to use timeout for behaviors that will not, cause serious bodily harm or serious property damage or serious ongoing disruption to family functioning. But there are some times where that's appropriate, but it's my least favorite reactive strategy. Let me emphasize that.
Sure.
For a 3-year-old, more often, we're turning our attention away from the child. A golden rule of behavior management is pay attention to behaviors you want to see more of. Turn attention away from behavior you want to see less of. So parents will say, well, that's not doing anything. Kid just threw food all over the floor and is tantruming. They need to know their consequences. Well, a consequence that matters to a 3-year-old is whether your parents are paying attention to you or not. So withdrawing attention in a controlled way, immediately, non-verbally, non-emotionally, just turning away, that is sending a powerful message that what you did is so inappropriate that I'm going to withdraw the one thing that you care most about in life is my response. So with a 3-year-old, often we're, uh, losing the battle to win the war. We temporarily say, well, okay, food's all over. We'll clean it up later, but we're going to turn away so that we don't unintentionally reinforce the behavior by paying more attention to it. So with 3-year-olds, that's often the approach. But the third basket is the promised land. That's an empathic response. Hey, kiddo, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about it? Can we put our heads together? Can we do some collaborative problem solving? And with a 3-year-old, you start doing an empathic response and looking for problem solving. That's not very developmentally appropriate. And from a 3-year-old's perspective, hey, I'm getting attention for just having thrown food all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a feel for how to decide which of those 3 reactive strategies to choose depending on the situation. For that one, I personally would vote for turning attention away. But then reactive strategies are not solutions. They're just damage control. They're just there to keep parents from making things even worse.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is, okay, food all over the floor, proactively, next meal that comes around, what can I do to keep that from happening again? And here's where we look at the child's profile. Is the child being asked to shift too quickly to a meal and they needed some transition time? Is the child being offered foods that they don't like and we need, because of their sensory profile, their taste preferences, et cetera, to give preferred foods first to get them into the idea of eating, and then a little bit of a non-preferred food, and then preferred food to keep them, to respect their sensory differences? Do they have a skill deficit in terms of fine motor control and they have difficulty feeding themselves, or with core tone where it's hard to sit up there for very long? Or do they have social skills issues where they're not reading the social cues that the family is sending? Do they have ADHD type issues where it's hard just to sit there? They're restless and they need more immediate gratification than this food that they don't like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'd think, why is this child having trouble sitting at the table? Let's go beyond consequences. Let's go beyond discipline and punishment and really get inside the child's head. And then maybe we can modify our approach in a way that's effective. So we could talk all day about an individual child's difficulty eating, and but just given a little bit of a teaser about how I begin to approach these things.
Absolutely. And I do wonder, in the conversations that you have with the child, when you are working to be proactive, what what validity is there, or what power is there in providing the child with opportunities to choose,
Huge,
involving them in the decision making?
huge, huge. So proactively, we can do some collaborative problem solving with a 3-year-old.
Sure.
Reactively, it doesn't fly very far. But in advance of the meal, hey, kiddo, time to eat. Do you want to finish playing with this toy first or come right to the table? That's an age appropriate request for a 3-year-old. Hey, it's time to eat. Do you want to have this or this? Do you want to sit here or here? Do you want to use this fork or this fork? So we give kids as much control as we can, and it's also good teaching for them to consider these options. And if there is a conflict between a 3-year-old's wishes and a parent's needs, sometimes we can lay that on the table with a 3-year-old. Child says, I don't want to eat now. You say, well, you know what? Mommy or daddy or family needs to eat, pretty soon. You don't want to eat now, but we've got to eat pretty soon. What could be okay? And, with a verbal 3-year-old, a little young to expect a lot, but we can start to give some choice, but still ask the child to consider that they're not the only person on the planet. That, hey, we're not going to do permissive parenting where we totally give you the choice. We're not going to do authoritarian parenting where, hey, you have to do what I say. What you're implying from the question, Stacey, is, hey, there's an our choice. There's a we, not just a you or a me, there's a we. And introducing the idea that other people's thoughts and feelings need to be considered when we're doing some problem solving can't start too young. We just have to make it an age appropriate kind of a consideration.
Yeah. I've actually found that with my own children, the more choices I give them regarding the kinds of foods we're going to eat at meal times,
Yep.
the kinds of utensils that they can select from,
Yeah.
the kinds of plates and bowls that they're able to utilize, the more likely they are to comply. And it's also very likely that one child might actually obtain two plates. I got one for you. Which one do you want? And then
Yep.
giving the other child a choice as well.
Yeah.
So
Great stuff. Great
it's
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
powerful, and it's
Yeah.
it's very interesting, to see how it all plays out. I know sometimes my kids, they go in waves in regards to pickiness. They kind of get stuck in eating certain kinds of foods, and then they want to eat those specific foods, for
Mhm.
dinner or for lunch. And so I might say something like, tonight for dinner, I'm going to make pasta and chicken. Which pasta should I make? And then show them two different pasta boxes to choose
Yeah.
from. They
Yeah.
usually go for the tricolor rotini,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at least giving them the choice, right? That
Yeah.
exposure.
Yeah. I love
And
it. I
then,
love it. What you're doing, Stacey. And
thank
I
you.
again would introduce the idea, even at this young age, that it's not all their choice. That, hey, you want this, you know what, mommy wants to have this or this. Is there something that we'd both be okay with?
Yep.
Hey, there are 2 cookies left in the cookie jar. You'd like to have 2 cookies. You know what, I'd like to have 2 cookies too. What would be a good compromise? Well, what about if we each get 1 cookie? So the given choices is a good way to smooth the transitions to meal times and do other things, other transitions, but it also is an opportunity to help kids outgrow some, developmentally normal egocentricity. So I do like from the get-go to have kids consider the other people's opinions whenever possible, but age appropriate, small kids,
Yep.
small, challenges, keep the complexity level down. We don't want to be putting problem solving on a 3-year-old that would be difficult for a 9-year-old.
Sure, of course. So I will say, providing children with these limited choices is very powerful. And when I was a teacher in the Montessori classroom, we would spend a lot of time um, presenting opportunities in regards to care of self, care of others, and care of environment. And by allowing children these kinds of opportunities, it really did help them to develop leadership skills from a very young age, because they knew, the steps that needed to be taken to complete specific tasks. And many of those tasks were transferable to home, whether it was, learning how to take off their shoes and put on slippers, or, if they needed to change themselves, after maybe they had an accident where they wet themselves or something, there were opportunities for them to practice some of these logical step by step skills in an effort to make things easier for them and make them, well, they would feel proud, but they would also be more self-dependent,
Mhm.
and just the benefits of that. And I think that a lot of parents don't realize how capable their children are because they might not know, what tasks or activities are developmentally appropriate for their specific child in regards to some of these activities or decisions. And so I wonder, when you are faced with those challenges, in the work that you do, what kind of support do you tend to provide to parents in an effort to help them kind of like, open their eyes a little bit more and see, just how capable their children can be?
Mhm. There's been this raging controversy for centuries about uh, how much support children need. You go back to John Locke and Rousseau about whether a child is a blank slate, as Locke would say, upon which we need to write uh, their moral code, their education, etc. Or as Rousseau would say, are they a seed that just needs to be planted and let it grow? And this kind of you know debate, this duel, this dichotomy about whether children should be left well enough alone or we need to step forward and help them. Otherwise, they won't grow and develop. I think it's a false dichotomy. Um, and there's a right level of support for each child. And certain schools are based on a hands-off approach. Other schools are based on a, hey, very structured, this is what you need to do. Here's the curriculum. But what we want to do, whether it's managing behavior or educating children or helping them develop, we want to find out what the right level of support is. And so one child might need a very, very high level of support. I work with kids who have pretty significant developmental differences, and we need to take some substantial steps forward to scaffold up those kids for success. Sink or swim would result in drowning. There are other kids who are being over guided. And those kids, we need to keep our hands off of them and let them just figure it out on their own. So I can't make generalizations about right level of support on a case by case basis. If we want to put on our cultural anthropologist hats, we could say that in general in this country, there has been a tendency towards worrying more and more about a child's social and emotional development with each passing century. Used to be parents really weren't at all concerned about their kids' emotional development or even their education for that matter in large parts of the country. And that has changed pretty dramatically. But there's a middle path that I believe in where we want to see what each kid needs and then help parents understand that. Some parents I'm saying, hey, you need to provide more support, and we need the teachers to provide more support, and leaving well enough alone is not well enough at all. Other parents I'm suggesting, hey, I think we can back off here, and not just in terms of the child, but even children's development is very uneven. For a given child, you might need to really give a lot of support in some areas. For example, social emotional development, some kids would need a lot of support, but the same child just flies in terms of academics, or flippy flop. Some kids need all sorts of academic support, but hey, they're great with peer interaction. So it's Howard Gardner's different kinds of smart, multiple intelligences. Uh, so I'm a believer in his way of thinking about things as well.
I do like that, and I do appreciate that response. And I will tell you, when it comes to allowing children the opportunity to learn, something new, even something as simple as zipping their coat. The technique that I like to use is my turn, then your turn. So it's like
Mhm.
before we even get going with it, I say, okay, it's time to put on your coat. I'm going to help you zip it. My turn, then your turn. And I just, might start it right at the bottom and then I show them the tab and I say, okay, your turn. And then give them that opportunity. And so the hope is that, little by little, even
Mhm.
though like this particular task of zipping a coat is particularly small,
Yeah,
it's something. And so building upon that something. So maybe at first it's, just giving them the opportunity to zip the coat, but maybe a few times later it's learning how to put their feet at the tag and then put their hands in the
right,
sleeves,
right,
to work on the flipping component. And
right.
so I think that for parents that are feeling particularly stressed right now, based on everything that is different, it's really important for them to also think about what is their child capable of.
Exactly.
Or,
And what you're suggesting, Stacy, is task analysis.
yes.
What are all the different sub-steps to putting on your coat, to brushing your teeth, to going to the bathroom, to getting ready for bed? Let's break it down
Yep.
and ask ourselves, well, how many of those steps can the child really do independently? And we don't even need to go through with them. But for a child who's struggling with putting on their coat, what steps do they need help with? We can test that out one sub step at a time. Is it the just starting the zipper there? Is it, knowing how to, put the coat on the floor and do the flip over? We ask all the different sub steps, and then we see in terms of chaining, we can do some diagnostic work. Hey, I'm going to do every one of these sub steps. I'm going to lay the coat on the floor for you in the right or with the right orientation. I'm going to guide your arms into the holes for you. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3 and help you flip it over for you. I'm going to help you start the zipper. I'm going to bring the zipper all the way up, and then you do the last tug of the zipper, the last link in the chain. Hey, you just put on your coat. Now we'll do all of those sub steps except the last two. I'll go all the way up to not just the last thing, but the all the way zip.
Hmm.
And so on. It's called backward chaining, where we put all the links laid out. And then one at a time, we give the child instruction on a sub-step, and that's the way we determine level of support. Some kids will say, I don't need you to do that for me. And they'll just zoom through it. And I was, okay, independent on that. Other kids will obviously get stuck on some sub-steps, and then we know what we need to focus on to do some repetition and teaching around that so that they feel competent and more independent.
Absolutely. And that power of positive reinforcement too. And just verbalizing, broadcasting what you see, like you had said in your example, you put on your coat, you just did
Yep.
it, and allowing them to just know what you've seen. Because I think right now, especially, children just they need to be heard and they also need to be seen. It's like when they're always home, you're like in each other's space. But I also feel like verbalizing the things that you see that are positive, that are the desired behaviors, is really important. It's like putting money in the bank, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
for another day.
Yep. So one of the classic parenting books is by Christopherson called Little People, written quite a few years ago now. But he coined the phrase "catch 'em being good"
Yep.
wherever we can. Give a little positive stroke here and there. Um, you know, Educators are taught to give a student at least 5 strokes for every one time you've got to redirect them or say something a little negative. That's not a bad ratio to keep in mind. And you want to customize your positive reinforcement. Some kids like that verbal thing. Instead of just good boy or good girl, hey, you just put on your coat, describing specifically what you're admiring. So they know, hey, that's what I'm getting positive attention for. And other kids think that's really artificial and too direct. They react to it quite negatively. And it's better for those kids to be more stealthy and subtle, and just the thumbs up
Yeah.
or the little touch on the shoulder or just passing high five or just a smile, and letting them feel noticed. That catch 'em being good, that you put, putting coins in the positive self-image piggy bank, um, is a great suggestion, Stacey. I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much. I've really appreciated this conversation today. And I do have your contact information listed on my website under the partners tab, which will soon, I think, be the collaborators tab. And so if anybody does need to reach you, they'll be able to get your email address and your web address there as well. So thank you so
Great.
much. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.